AfterBuzz TV, the destination for TV superfans. Producing after shows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows. Interviewing celebrities and showrunners. And bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Did you watch the show at all?
What are we covering?
Yep.
Well, either way, I'm just gonna wing it. Wow, what a show last night. UFC 196. A lot of people were already talking maybe one of the most highest pay-per-view gates of all time, or pay-per-view buys of all time.
Certainly a good gate, and where's the damn notes? Good gate and box office.
But
almost
good.
just under 15,000 there.
But good lord,
8.1 million.
What an event!
Mm-hmm.
Just still people talking to the second, but
well,
we're gonna.
What event are we talking about, by the way?
I said UFC 196.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What happened in that show?
A lot. We're gonna talk about it. We're here to talk about it here at the UFC After Show here on AfterBuzz TV, the After Show Network. I am George Hermoza, and I look a little tall. I am George Hermoza, and you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram at ghermoza, GHERMOZA. And as always, right next to me is my partner in crime.
Hi,
and
J10-716. I'm in the chat room. You should join us there as well. Quick shout out to those of us in the chat room: Brandon Clifford, Tiani Foster. I hope I didn't butcher your name there, and I'm typing something to you right now. And of course, our main cornerman, Joe Boza, third man in the stage, if you will. There, how about that? That's not bad.
How about
right?
it? Yeah. So last night, March 5th, 2016. Obviously, originally it was supposed to be Rafael dos Anjos versus Conor McGregor for the lightweight. It feels weird that you're looking at me and typing.
And looking. No, I was multitasking.
I just thought it was weird.
Boom! Check me out now.
All those people. By the way, thank you.
Join
us
in the chat room.
Whether you're watching us live on YouTube or even listening to us later on, not live on iTunes or SoundCloud. Seriously, we truly, truly appreciate you guys listening and watching us.
Most of
whether it's YouTube and iTunes, SoundCloud, etc., etc. Feel free to hit us up at any time on the Twitter. We're also on Instagram. Feel free to like all our pictures.
Lita fan for life, George. We got another pro wrestling crossover going on here.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm. She says, she. I don't know if it's a she or he, but Lita fan for life says, awesome pay-per-view last night. That's what I wanted to ask. Okay, so you mentioned that, and let's jump into this. We'll get this question out of the way. Two huge main event matches, main event and co-main event, one title match. Big matches, which I think are going to be, to me, they're easily match of the year candidates that I think will stand until when we start talking about it in November. Now, were those two matches enough for you to consider this a potential event of the year? Because the undercard, mixed bag, right?
I think UFC 195 was better as far as just from top to bottom.
And that was
Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit.
Right.
But we also saw some sweet, impressive victories from Brian Ortega, Abel Trujillo, Stipe Miocic. So just to kind of go from top to bottom, I think it was more entertaining from top to bottom as opposed to UFC 196.
I agree.
I guess you can say only from top. Yeah, not to the bottom.
There were some good results. I think early in the I'm a she says. Okay. Shout out to you there, Lita fan for life. I wonder if that's Daria in disguise there.
Maybe.
Agreed. It's I think the top two matches, of course. This is one of the few shows that I can think of where I might argue that those top two matches might qualify it for that. There were some good finishes in the beginning of the prelims, the early prelims, and then the early prelims. The Fight Pass ones.
Vitor Miranda looked great.
And hell, Jim Miller and Diego Sanchez.
That was a fun fight. I like
the fight. Exactly. Yeah. So there were some points that delivered, but you did definitely have a lull, kind of in terms of match excitement. In the undercard of the main card. But that's what fascinates me about this show is those two matches that really felt like one of those huge moments of the year.
I mean,
this show.
Especially because it's not too often where we see a championship title fight not be the main event.
I can't remember the last time that happened. That's kind of
how it shows just how big not only this fight, but essentially Conor McGregor. Let's be real. I mean, whether or not he's his record or whatnot, or obviously he tapped out, but the guy's a moneymaker, the first ever guy to ever break $1 million to show up.
Yes, reported purse that is, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's get into that fight. The main event, Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, of course.
Mom, get out of here!
This was a replacement. This was a replacement. This was not the original main event. Of course, we were expecting to see for the light heavyweight. I'm sorry, not light heavyweight. Lightweight championship. Conor McGregor moving up. And, obviously, was it 11 days ago? 11, 12 days ago?
Yeah.
Just about, yeah.
Less than 2 weeks.
Enter Nate Diaz.
There's still so much to process from the match itself, the setup, the difference in weight for both of these guys. I still think that if we were really keeping track of day-to-day going-ons of these fighters, I think there's conversation to have about since October and the IV ban and how they're rehydrating themselves, things like that. But like I said, there's a lot of context in this match. Even in the outcome, there is just as much as going in. Going in, you had, again, two guys not even of the same weight class themselves fighting in a weight class above each other and above, it's like going into neutral territory. Both guys going into neutral territory, Granted, Nate has fought there in the past. Conor, I don't think he has. But, I mean, it would have to be in Ireland or somewhere if he did, but I don't think that's the case. There is that. There is Nate taking it on the last-minute notice, the fact that it's not a title fight, and yet still 5 rounds. I think if it's another here's a case in point. If it's anybody else, any other champion that this happened to, last-minute dropout, I think that becomes a non-title match, and it falls to co-main event, and Holm Tate would have been the main event, and so this could have been a 3-round fight if it was anybody besides McGregor.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time it's happened, but definitely the first time in a while, and obviously the UFC is in a different place that it is now that it was back then.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking early.
I know the last time, I don't know if it really counts, but UFC 100 actually had John Fitch in the main event. But that was because of time. They had time to fill. They're like, let's throw in another fight. I don't know if a lot of people remember that.
Was it a swing match? Was it after the 3 title matches?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Gosh, I don't.
Because
remember
the 2 title matches.
But...
Because I know Henderson Bismarck ended pretty quick.
Right.
Brock and Mir ended pretty quick. They're like, we got a lot of time left. Let's have this match that's on hold. Because I think it was already there.
Really?
It was John Fitch. I want to say against Paulo Thiago.
We can look this up. Quite
if
frankly,
if you look it up on Wikipedia, they have it listed as like 4th.
That's what our chief cornerman is.
But there's like an asterisk, and it said this was aired after, or this was.
Oh, it aired.
I don't know if it aired, but no, it was done after the fight itself.
Live?
Yeah.
You sure about that?
Yeah.
Joe Boza, go look it up. Tell us what was the sequence of the last 3 or 4 matches. UFC 100. We'll be looking in the chat room.
I could be wrong as far as now that you say aired.
I'd be surprised because I don't think that they do. I know on other shows like Lead XC, when they were doing things on Showtime, they would always have a swing bout, which meant that there was one bout assigned that they would either put before the main events, depending on timing, how timing was going, because they had to measure the matches for time on the
see, it says in Wikipedia
portion.
This fight was delayed until after the main event. I just don't know if that meant that it was done after the main event or it was just aired after the main event. But I don't know.
Right.
Either way, even before then, we're talking like
Joe Boza says
maybe over 10 years ago.
George is right. I looked it up. All right, I sit corrected.
Maybe over 10 years ago, where the main event was a championship fight. Maybe more.
No, it was like 2007 or 8, I think.
It wasn't that early. No, it was 9? It was like 2004, 2005.
No.
Guarantee.
No, UFC 100 was not in 2004.
No. I'm talking like not including this one. The last time it was like promoted to be a main event and it wasn't a championship fight, even though there was a championship fight. This was UFC 100 2009.
That's what I'm saying.
That was July 11, 2009.
Okay.
But before that,
numbers
obviously,
right,
obviously it's a little bit different now. Conor McGregor is like the ultimate cash cow for the UFC, so rightfully so.
They kept him in the main spot specifically for that, obviously.
I mean, I do think it's a little controversial because it kind of, I don't want to say diminishes, the prestige of the championship, but it's also Conor McGregor. It's just from a sporting aspect, it diminishes it, but at the same time, they're still selling pay-per-views. They're still selling, tickets to the show. You can't have everybody leave after the Conor McGregor fight and have half an arena full for the Miesha Tate and Holm fight.
Well, you can because it's the title match. You can't control people leaving or not leaving. In this respect, they did obviously by putting Conor in there. But here's what's fascinating, though. Do you think that? And I should open this up to the chat room as well for their opinion. That said, in some ways, it kind of backfired on them, didn't it? Because their golden goose lost in this case. So all of these actions of going out of their way to whether to appease Conor or to milk him for as much as they could, now has that hurt? Here's the question: are they going to do that again? Would they do that again with him? Has it hurt the luster of the women's bantamweight title? And I'm not sure. I don't know that it did necessarily hurt it, but I think that's probably more because of the quality of the match itself.
I think a lot of it has to do with just the result of the last two fights, and you saw the quality. That honestly, as far as social media goes and other websites, and I pretty much didn't even see it get mentioned.
Right.
It was so irrelevant because of the level of Conor McGregor. And,
which is to say that, unfortunately, you can still, it kind of negates the argument of the title match should always go on at last, which traditionally you and I, guys like us, think about it because we're kind of that mind state that you honor the belt. But yet, here's an example of opening the door where, well, there's some guys or women where you are going to put them on last because they are the big draw. What if Ronda comes back and doesn't have a title match?
And Demetrius Johnson or something like that. And God respect, all due respect to Demetrius Johnson, he's not exactly the cash cow that other champions are. Or doesn't even, like I said, I think he drew like maybe in the 150,000, which is...
It wasn't the lowest, but it was darn close, unfortunately.
But let's talk about this fight. Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor. The buildup was there. Real quick, though, I want to say that the editing team in UFC were probably working overnight until Nate Diaz inserted himself. And we're like, all right, well, we don't have to do anything. What? They got a press conference coming up? Oh, that should be easy.
Right.
The promotion was, like I said, you look at the video packages between Dos Anjos and Conor and Nate Diaz and Conor, like, they didn't have to do anything. All it was back and forth. And it was great. It makes for entertaining buildups, even as Conor thought. Like, Conor said, I had fun in the build-up to this fight.
It couldn't have worked out better. It was an upgrade, to be sure, from going from RDA to Nate. But that said, it would have been, if you had more time, of course, there would have been more opportunity for a bit more storyline, more antics and stuff. Excuse me. Do you think, though, that this, we kind of got to the point of overload or the breaking point of Conor McGregor? In some way we did. In the match itself. We've now seen him, even though he was not undefeated, we saw him lose on the big stage.
I don't think so, just because at the end of the day, and a lot of people are forgetting about this, he's still the undisputed featherweight champion of UFC. So
you think that still means as much, though?
Yeah. If it was one division up, maybe, but if it's two divisions up, it's like you don't really see many guys fight between featherweight and welterweight back to back.
True. I think, though, what's interesting is I think it now, unfortunately, puts him amidst the pack. He's still one of the greats, and obviously probably still the biggest star in the UFC, one of two, depending on what you want to qualify Ronda, if she's in or she's not. But he's now just another UFC champion. He had the fantastic win over Jose Aldo, obviously. Ronda had some fantastic wins amongst the top competition in her weight class. But everybody gets beat. And it's easy for fans to forget that. Fedor. I'm trying to think who else. Randy comes to mind, although that's not the best example, Randy Couture, because he's had a lot of losses against real tough guys. But yeah, Fedor. Who are some of the other guys that looked unstoppable?
Anderson
Silva. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Vanderlei before he went up against Yoshida and Mark Hunt.
I thought George St. Pierre looked unstoppable, and even though he technically beat Johnny Hendricks, I so did not think that GSP won that fight.
But he had been beaten.
But he looked beatable at the same time. Yeah.
Him,
but even in that last fight, like a lot of people were already thinking coming out of the fight before he quote unquote retired, like we're like, well, this guy's beatable now.
Yeah. I think though that it does. Conor loses a little bit of luster. He's no longer the untouchable. You know. That I think a lot of people thought him to be previously. I
think had he would have been undefeated, yes. But and yes, I know he had a 15 fight winning streak.
Right.
But it's not his first loss. It's not his second loss either.
Right. I'm not qualifying those two because they were far enough back that he's a different fighter now. Here's a case in point. Again, Lita Fan of Her Life says, I ordered it for Miesha Holly, understandable, and to hopefully see Conor lose. I ended up enjoying the whole card too, so ordering the event ended up being money very well spent. I agree there, Daryl.
I think it's too soon to say. I think we need to look at what he's going to do next, how he does next. Because if he goes out and personally thinking, I know we're jumping ahead to what's next for them, but if he ends up fighting Frankie Edgar next,
he better fight Frankie Edgar.
And he
featherweight title match,
and he just completely destroys Frankie Edgar. I think now that whatever luster that we were saying that he lost, now it's like again. Back on,
Agreed. Totally
So
agree.
I think it's too soon. 24 hours is a little too soon to say, well, he's back to being a fighter. I mean, yes, obviously the immediate reaction is that, but
but there were a lot of concessions made for him, being allowed to jump into a weight class that he'd never been in, at least in the UFC, and go for that title. And people talk about the previous that he's been a title holder. A two-weight class title holder before. He did do that, but he never defended either of them. He won the featherweight title, then he won the lightweight title. I think it was Cage Warriors. I know it was a UK promotion. And then he got signed by the UFC. There is that adage, and I believe it to a certain extent, a large extent, you're not really a champion until you successfully defend. And, there's an argument to say, well, if you beat the champion, then you are the champion. Yes, but that successful title defense really establishes you as deserving of that top rank for the rest of history.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, obviously Holly Holm, but where did you see...
I want to defer to the chat room right quick, too. Tiani Foster says, do you think Conor will want a rematch? What do you think?
Well, I wanted to talk about that after the fight.
Tiani Foster's asking right now, my friend.
No, because we're going to get into it.
And she's still in there. Is there a rematch planned for Ronda and Holly?
See, now you're jumping way ahead.
No, it's in the chat room.
No, I know, but I'm saying, I want to talk about the actual fight. I want to know your opinions of the actual fight as far as where do you think Conor went wrong, or do you think just he was in over his head? I mean, I have my opinions on why he lost. But I want to hear yours.
He looked good in the first. He won the first. I think he was outboxing Nate for the most part there. He'd mentioned himself that his not quite his timing, but his measurement or his distance was off. But Nate's a wily fighter unto himself. It's understandable that it would take some time to really measure up. But he beat Nate decisively in that first one. I think the mistake for me, I don't even know if it qualified as a mistake, but Nate started tagging Conor with a couple combos to the head, stunned him, and honestly, when Conor had that look in his face like, anyway, he's got the beard, so you can't quite fully read his face. The first thing that jumped into my head is he's playing possum and making fun of Nate like Anderson did to Chris Weidman. He's actually clowning on him in there, and I wouldn't put it past Conor. Although I also think that's not typically Conor's style to just fake a guy like that. He's going to talk shit in your face, as opposed to playing possum and like, oh, I'm about to go down, psych. So watching the seconds after that, realizing, wait, no, Nate actually did really affect him there. That was fascinating, and Nate jumped on the opportunity. Again, I don't know that you call it a mistake, because when Conor's getting tagged up there, he shoots for the takedown, which is kind of a silly thing to do against Nate. But what else are you going to do?
I mean, he obviously he was. I think it was more out of desperation.
Yeah, you had to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's desperation or you have no other choices, you shoot for that takedown. He didn't get it. Nate capitalized on that, sprawled fantastically. I think spun around and got his back and pulled him over. Ended up in the rear naked choke.
It was like a north-south at first.
That's
and was
right.
able to get into the
guillotine. I mean, Conor on the ground versus Nate on the ground. I think now between Chad Mendes, the Chad Mendes match with Conor, and this match, clearly, I mean, we kind of saw the same thing with Sage. There's work on the ground to be done. You know, these guys may be proficient enough against most opponents, but when you get to that level of ground guy, of a Chad Mendes with the wrestling, or Nate with his submissions, that's an elite level of ground talent that you're facing, and you know there's going to be holes to fill up there.
I saw it as a combination of two things.
Yeah.
One, obviously, Conor being Conor. You know, not I don't want to say he got cocky in any single way. I think he fought a great fight, but he typically likes to call the shot, and he kind of kept being persistent with the overhead left hook. You know, and if
it was working,
but if you keep doing it enough, they're going to see that. But at the same time, I think it overall came to he was fighting a Nate Diaz, or in fact, he was fighting a Diaz brother fight. He won that first round, but that doesn't mean that Nate Diaz was out. He was fighting a Nate Diaz fight. He was striking with them. You know, Nate Diaz. I mean, and here's a guy, and both of them for the fact that they don't get finished. They probably combine them. They probably have got finished maybe 2 or 3 times between the two. That's pretty impressive.
And early on in.
So
in their careers.
The fact that, I mean, I know the last time Nate Diaz got finished was by Josh Thompson. But, you know, besides that, they don't really get finished.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so the longer this fight went, I think it was going to be advantage Nate Diaz. And he just happened to tag him. Obviously, stand-up warfare, like Nate, great boxer, along with his brother. Nate, great on the ground. I mean, I just think he fought a Nate Diaz fight. And I think that was the biggest flaw.
What would have been dangerous, though, I think, is if it had gone to the third round. Let's say we saw some combination of the striking we saw in the first and the beginning of the second, which you could argue over that period and a half, probably pretty even, right? I mean, the momentum went in different ways. You tack that on throughout, all 5 rounds, right? The way that the Diaz brothers open up and get bloodied up, you know, the biggest criteria, the first primary criteria of judging is damage. And to that effect, if Conor keeps looking like Conor did at the end of the match, and Nate keeps going in that direction and looking like he does, I think Conor walks away with the decision, you know? Even if, let's say Conor survives that rear naked choke, and then the rest of it is all striking, you know, facially, I think Nate ends up losing that one by 5-round decision.
I don't know about that. I mean, I can make the same argument for a fight that happened last week, but initially,
which one?
Michael Bisping, Anderson Silva.
Sure, okay.
Because Bisping looked beat up. Like, you look at damage done, and obviously, but I mean, I agree with you, but obviously that's not the same way that the judges think.
Right.
So
right.
they're going to look at
potential.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I said, I totally thought it was a Nate Diaz fight, and the more I saw Nate Diaz connect with those, I guess you can call it like the Stockton slaps. I think that's what they're calling them. It was like he kept doing it and he kept hitting them. I mean, that's all it is. And the fact that Nate Diaz, and both of them too, I know I speak about Nick a lot, but this is their fight. I mean, he didn't have a training camp, but he was like, I was doing a triathlon anyways. Like, he's never going to show up out of shape.
So. I still will argue that, I mean, I think we saw 2 fight of the year contenders and also easily 2 of the top 10 submissions of the year. I think we saw that last night.
I mean, if you invested in rear naked choke in the stock market, you would have gotten really, really up. But going back to what we were going to talk about maybe like a rematch or whatnot, I do think that Conor McGregor was humbled. I don't think he's going to fight at 155 anytime soon. Right. Maybe not in the next 6 to 9, 10 months. I think he is going to go back down to defend the 145 at UFC 200.
He had better. I firmly feel this.
And it better be against Frankie Edgar.
It just makes sense, right? What else makes sense? Even though these guys fought at 170, he fought a lightweight. He was supposed to fight a lightweight for the championship. He ended up fighting the number 5 contender at lightweight. Granted, it was a different weight class, but it was different for Nate as well. And he lost to that number 5 lightweight. I don't think that size and weight necessarily made that much of a difference. One, they were only 1 pound apart at weigh-ins.
They didn't even have to cut weight. Neither did Nate.
Right. They were basically the same size weight-wise. I don't know about going into the cage, but at weigh-ins, when it's official, then that. But also that he lost to the number 5 contender. So there's no way that you can talk about him versus RDA anytime soon. Especially, okay, you got your opportunity to have an outside your own neighborhood match. Get back in your own lane. Do your obligation as a champion, you know?
Yeah.
I think that makes... And he wants to fight at 200. So it's... All the ducks are lined up right now, unless there's some other kind of detail or something that screws up the conversation to confirm McGregor versus Frankie Edgar at 200. And, dude, that is a solid... That's not just a title match. That is a solid title match worthy of being at 200. That's worth main eventing.
Before I want to ask you about what's next for Nate Diaz, who probably has the biggest win of his life.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about maybe Conor's, I guess, comments after his fight? Like, were you expecting like maybe like a more cockiness, or did you like the the humbleness of it?
Oh,
also too, like, what do you think about the comments from Aldo and Rafael dos Anjos after?
You're gonna have to speak to that because I didn't look up what either of those guys said.
They pretty much said like, oh, I mean, excuse my language. I don't really like to cuss on this show, but pretty much called him like a pussy.
Right.
Yeah. Or they both called him that. Where it's like, oh, who's the pussy now, or something like that.
They're just going into work mode. Screw that.
I mean, but Conor responded.
Did he?
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much said, and I want to kind of read off what he put on his Instagram and Facebook. He put, I stormed in and put it all on the line. I took a shot and missed. I will never apologize for taking a shot. Shit happens. I'll take this loss like a man. I will not shy away from it. It will not change who I am. If another champion goes up 2 weights, let me know. If you're tired of me making money, take a nap. I'll still be here when you wake up with the highest... I will still wake up when you wake up with the highest PPV or pay-per-view and the gate. Still talking multi-sevens, etc., etc. But I'll eat it all and come back. Aldo, you are a pussy. Dos Anjos, you are a pussy. When the history books are written, I showed up. You showed up on Twitter. To the fans, never ever shy away from challenges. So, like, I don't lose respect for Aldo or Dos Anjos, but like at the same time, he showed up. And I want to talk about this real quick. Is that fact that I like to think that the option for not fighting on the card was there because they still had a very viable championship match. We've seen guys.
The option for McGregor not fighting on the card?
Yeah, I'm sure they were like, well, do you want to fight on the card? I'm sure they asked him.
There. Because there's different levels.
I'm sure they asked him if he still wants to fight on the card. And I'm sure they just asked him and he just probably said, like, absolutely.
I think that all three of them, 3 or 4, since it's, 4 or 5, Sean Shelby takes care of, I think, 145 and below, and then Joe Silva, 155 and above. But Dana, Lorenzo, Joe Silva, Sean Shelby, and Conor and his team, all of those guys looked at each other and said, yeah, of course we're fighting on this.
Of course. I just think the question was that, but we look at that and look at what he did, what Conor McGregor did, and you look at somebody like John Jones, who was supposed to fight Dan Henderson at UFC 151,
Okay.
to the point where that event got canceled. It got canceled all because of that one fight, and they offered him a fight, and it got canceled because he said no.
Maybe McGregor can call John Jones a pussy, viably so.
I don't know. I mean,
I think he can.
Do you still kind of respect Conor from that? It's like, do you lose respect? As far as, I mean, we always respect them, of course.
I don't lose any respect for Conor. I did expect him to be humble and gracious in defeat. Didn't surprise me at all. That's what you do when you talk that much shit. When you're that big in pushing yourself, you have to know when to pull back. That's the sign of somebody. Or that's a trait of somebody that knows when to hold them, or knows when to hold them, and knows when to fold them. Proverbially speaking, obviously. He got beat. There's no arguing it. And so the easiest way to move forward from that is to just say, yeah, I got beat. I will learn from it. Not make... He didn't make any excuses.
Showed up at the press conference, too. A
Exactly.
lot of people don't show up at the press conference when that happens to them.
That was an impressive press conference in that so many of the winners and losers did show up. Holly was there, McGregor, like you said, and they were open in speaking. Holly, good God. I mean, my heart breaks for her. She was going to break into tears any moment, every moment.
I was expecting a Cormier from her.
In what way?
Because Cormier was flat out crying at the press conference.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But it was nice to see all of that. The show ended very nicely, and having all of those people on the Diaz there. But it doesn't surprise me at all that it's the same thing with Bisping. When we spoke last week about kind of the British style is to be very or British sarcasm. I'll say I wouldn't say it's a British style overall, but the British brand of sarcasm, very dry, very cutting and coarse, but they also that same caricature has a certain couth and what do you want to call it? Civility or professionalism, so that when they get beat, they step back and they give credit where credit's due. That's what we saw with Conor, and I think that's also kind of inherent, honestly, between Conor. Many great fighters, or I'll even say martial artists. It's kind of the tenet of martial arts. Not the shit-talking part necessarily, but the humility in defeat. You see that even with the Diaz brothers.
Well, I mean, with that said, I did like the respect shown, after the fight. You would have never thought. I mean, obviously, as true MMA fans, we see a lot of these, I don't want to say like hatred, but just kind of like you were like, oh, they're never going to, give props to each other after the fight.
I always expect that, though. No, I expect that kind of professionalism from the Diaz brothers. Yeah. Talk about even Nate. Go back to Nate and Frank Shamrock.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Nick. Excuse me. How much did they hate each other in that build-up, And then Nick put it on Frank for, 4 or 5 rounds, picked him up and said, in the match was done, he said, get up, you're a legend.
Yeah.
I think is...
Like, it doesn't surprise me anymore to see that kind of... Yeah. The build-up and then, obviously the kind of leaving it all in the cage.
Yeah.
And once the cage is over, give each other the props and,
what's funny is that people see that, and this is what's great about it, is people see that and automatically assume, okay, these guys now are friends, or they're at least professionally recognizing each other on a professional standard. That doesn't mean that you can't hate the guy afterwards, You just kicked my ass. I will shake your hand. You kicked my ass. There's no way of arguing it. We got it, cameras all over. Everyone saw it. But you still suck.
Yeah.
I still want to pee on your grave, Those two things can coexist, guys, But what I was going to say, for as misunderstood or as wild and crazy as the Diaz brothers are, because they say some wild shit that only half the people can understand, the other half we all just kind of assume that they're crazy. I think they are martial artists in that spirit, in that character of recognizing your opponent once it's all said and done with. And they probably, I don't think that they necessarily get enough credit for that because they're otherwise so wild and crazy. But there is that, you know?
I agree. Before we move on to the next fight, what do you think is next for Nate Diaz?
Nate should get, let's look at our rankings here. I would be okay with a title shot. Let's see. Eddie Alvarez is not booked yet, correct?
Correct.
Habib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson. That's in April. Anthony Pettis. He's sitting out right now, right? He's not booked yet, I don't think. Oh, no, he did. He is booked. Wait a second.
Oh, no, wait, he's fighting...
Let's look to... This was another part of the conversation.
He's fighting Edson Barboza.
Edson Barboza, just announced, yes. UFC Unstoppable campaign. Eddie Alvarez or... You know what? Here's the argument. Eddie Alvarez is a number 1 contender. Nate versus Eddie is a fantastic fight.
Because, I mean, even so, Rafael dos Anjos, when is he going to be back?
Right. Well, yeah, good point. Yeah, we don't know. Although, let's assume that he's not going to be gone for too long. Now, here's the other argument, though. Rafael dos Anjos, Nate Diaz. RDA beat Nate, right? Mm-hmm. But Nate just finished the guy that RDA was supposed to fight. So, by MMA math, boom. That is...
to me, it doesn't matter what division it's in. I mean, obviously, it's shown that you can be successful in one division and get a title shot in another division.
Right.
So the fact that this was at welterweight, he beat the featherweight champion, I completely agree as far as... If Rafael dos Anjos isn't ready, obviously, Nate Diaz got the big payday. Maybe he wants to relax a little bit. Yeah. I know his purse was $500,000.
Right.
Got an extra $100,000. I'm sure he's still going to get a lot more.
Is it 100 or 50? Oh, yeah.
50, and he got the fight tonight and the performance.
Yeah.
I know he's walking with a lot more than 600,000. He just has to. Like, how do you
main event non-title match for Reebok
with
sponsorships?
And
what was that, 40,000?
Some of the maybe 30 as well. Yeah. I know he should at least walk home. He'll go back to Stockton with at least $1 million.
Let's hope that Metal Militia is taking care of Nate there.
Yeah.
Huh?
So it should be fun, interesting.
There were some people, real quick, talking about Nate versus Robbie Lawler. Some people just talking about it last night on either on the internet or wherever. What do you think of that one?
I did find it a little weird that the only championship that really wasn't showcased on that press conference was the welterweight championship. And my thoughts was, are they waiting for Conor to win for them maybe to announce that at UFC 200? So I thought that was a little weird. But
Dana did say something.
I wouldn't want to see Diaz versus Lawler.
Yeah, I don't think there's a need for that, especially given how many killers there are at 170. And don't do that.
I still think Woodley would. It deserves that shot.
I agree with you. I'm on board with that. I'm checking in here again with the chat room. Looks like Joe Boza and Lita Fan for Life are going at it here. DJ Cass just joined in here. They're still on the talking. Oh, and Milton Forrester. How do you think, based on how he talked, he had to show up? He may be in conversation here with Joe Boza and Lita Fan for Life. They're talking about Holly and Miesha.
Yeah.
Joe Boza says here, Holly stepped up to face Miesha. She will always be a champion in my eyes. She knew that this was her fourth UFC fight. She will be okay. Go back to the board and improve on it. Yeah. I agree with that.
Let's talk about that fight. Let's talk about the championship fight for the women's bantamweight championship. Holly Holm just came off a victory of her life against Ronda Rousey, against Miesha Tate, who was ranked number 2. Anything? I mean, were you predicting that outcome, or
no.
maybe that winner?
No, my predictions were that McGregor was going to was gonna. I don't know if he was going to finish, but he was going to put it on Diaz. I thought he was going to outstrike Diaz, and that Holly would have Miesha's number, and that Miesha would not be able to kind of get in her groove and really put much of an offense. Happy to be wrong because it makes the sport exciting.
Absolutely.
Miesha did a fantastic job and came in with just a different strategy. She fought her game, didn't fall into fighting, kind of getting overexcited to defeat Holly. Miesha fought Miesha's fight, and it certainly paid off. Fascinating scorecard. It's out there. You guys should Google it. Obviously, Miesha finishing Holly by rear naked choke towards the end of the what was it?
The 5th round.
3:30 of the 5th. So we got our money's worth on that one. What was the? How did you score it?
I scored it exactly how the judges did.
Okay, all right.
And had Miesha would have won that fight, it would have been a draw.
And let's talk about
officially
the scores.
too. Not even my opinion. That's what the judges said.
Agreed.
They scored the second round, and rightfully so, a 10-8 for Miesha.
So round 1 was, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but round 1 was Holly. Yeah. Round 3 was Holly. Round 2 was a 10-8 for Miesha. Round 4 was Holly. So it's tie.
And I think
it's Misha's down 1 point going into the 5th.
And I think had that fight would have gone to decision, I think Holly did enough work for it to be a 10-9 for Miesha and not another 10-8. So, like I said, Miesha was coming from behind.
Be a 10-9 for Miesha. So you think it would have been a
had she would have maybe
tie.
not tapped and maybe found a way to not obviously stay in the fight, but still be on the defensive, obviously it would have went to Miesha.
I realized that round 2 was super. Miesha absolutely won it with that takedown and rear naked choke towards the end. I gave it a 10-9. But
every judge scored it a 10-8.
Yeah, well, there's been many instances where fans and people in the media disagree with the judges. I'm not saying I'm right, per se.
This is one of those stories, too, where Miesha Tate, I mean, a lot of people counted her out. I mean, she was the thoughts of retiring not too long ago. I mean, she's a veteran in the sport, too.
But I don't think that was a real retirement.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thought of it was there.
It was more of career glass ceiling retirement.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to do right now, so I'm going to retire. It's kind of I hate to make the exact correlation, but a Jason Mayhem Miller retirement. He lost and said, I'm going to retire. But he could have come back at any point, and by the same token, I think had Miesha declared a retirement, we would have seen her come back as well.
I mean, they gave Holly Holm the option, too, and kudos for her. They gave her the option to wait it out for Ronda, but Holly's a fighter. A lot of these people, they're fighters. Yes, the paycheck is nice.
All of them are fighters.
Yeah, but
they're
fighters at heart.
Especially ones in the UFC.
Not someone who's going to hold off and say, well, Ronda's a big money fight. I'd rather wait for that. No, she wanted to fight. And this is only 4 months after her last fight.
Only 4 months. That's when you do fight.
Exactly. But, I mean, compared to maybe some of the other fighters.
I think a lot of it was drawn, I think a lot of the idea of holding off was the buzz of Rousey Holm, too. To me, though, I'm thrilled with the way that this whole thing played out. Holm Miesha or Holm Tate was exactly the right match to make, the right time. And obviously, we had a fantastic match for it, so you can't ask for much more there, short of being a Holly fan and wanting Holly to win, which a couple people I was watching the show with last night, one of them was just freaking out and couldn't wrap her head around the whole thing. It was kind of funny to watch.
I mean, it does kind of create this triangle. I mean, obviously, for the longest time, it was Ronda Rousey and everyone else. Now that there's triangle, I mean, we'll talk about this fight in a second too, where as opposed to a square, because the first fight of the night was Amanda Nunes against Valentina Shevchenko.
Yep.
In my opinion, that was just as important of a match as opposed to maybe any other matches in terms of that division. You have number 4 Amanda Nunes who looks great most of the times, but I thought she didn't look that great, which is why she shouldn't be involved in that UFC Bantamweight Championship just yet. It stays Holm, Rousey, and Tate. So
yes and no. And I was talking with Joe Bozo about this just before we went on in the chat room. In the effort of avoiding bottleneck of the whole of that weight class and the title shot, then you can have Amanda Nunes in the mix and Kat Zingano as well. Now, their name is not going to mean anywhere near anything what these top 3 are, Holm, Tate, and Rousey. But there was a time that Holm didn't make a difference in terms of pay-per-view either, you know, and who knows that she did. I think this whole thing was drawn specifically with McGregor and then got an extra boost with Diaz, you know. But this is a step in the right direction of building Holm as being value added to a pay-per-view, and Miesha as well. That match built up both of their net worth, you know, for pay-per-view, that is. So, and you have to keep doing that, you know. Otherwise, your division or your talent roster gets stale. I mean,
so who's next for Miesha Tate?
We see that in pro wrestling.
So who's next for Miesha Tate?
Next for Miesha, well, I totally agree in booking Ronda. Let's assume that Ronda is ready, wants to come back. I think you absolutely, for the sake of money, and I can make an argument for credibility. Ronda and Miesha 3. As her Miesha's first title defense, okay? Because you've got now Ronda, who, whether you like her or hate her, and there's a lot of people that hate her but actually really do like her, okay? She's a draw. Still, let's not make any bones about that. Now her arch nemesis has that thing that is hers, that everybody for years has thought is hers, is Ronda. It's Ronda's belt still, even though she lost it fair and square, and now Holly lost it. It's Miesha's belt. But a lot of people still think it's Ronda's belt, okay? So Ronda is now it's a new twist on an old tale that we know fans do like and want to see. Even though the chat room and the internet may say, no, I don't want to see it, I don't want to see it. Yes, you do. You didn't want to see Kimbo versus Dada, but you tuned in, so don't tell me about that, okay?
I mean, depending on when Ronda's going to come back, I think October, November, I mean, I don't see why they can't do a rematch at UFC 200.
Agreed. Depending on when Ronda comes back. For some reason, I heard buzz about August.
I heard October/November.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe Miesha wants to defend beforehand. In which case, yeah, possibly Holm.
That makes sense to me.
That makes sense.
Not for the sake of having a rematch. I just think that Holly Holm is the best contender that's ready for that time.
That said, Zingano or Nunes are.
But Zingano hasn't fought since she lost.
Okay, yeah. I'm thinking about the rankings. Yeah. So maybe Nunes. Maybe Holly is not ready for whenever Miesha wants to defend, and maybe UFC wants more than one title match on 200. I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
You know. So if you've got nothing else, then possibly you stick on Miesha as a title defense there. In which case, by default, if everybody else is unavailable, you're looking at Amanda Nunes. And that may not get everybody's toes tapping, but it's a title match. It's one with a top 5 contender, and, that's what you do. Now, then again, maybe you got Robbie Lawler in the mix. Maybe you got a Robbie Lawler title defense for July, and then you hold off on Miesha for another pay-per-view. I wouldn't do that, come to think of it. Because Robbie Lawler's title defense definitely will mean more than Miesha Tate's. I hate to make a judgment. I'm making that judgment call there. Put Robbie Lawler as the main event of another pay-per-view, and then you got Conor defending against Edgar and Miesha Tate. You continue to build up the women's division there. Granted, by attracting eyeballs by default with the Conor McGregor factor, but there you go.
Yeah, we got to start wrapping up soon. But
Yeah.
just to go over some of the other fights real quick, we had Ilir Latifi beat John Villante. Latifi looked good. Corey Anderson defeated Tom Lawler. I thought that fight was boring, to be honest with you. What do you think, real quick?
Yeah, well, both of those matches did not. I mean, they were kind of part of the problem more than anything else.
Even when the guy who won was like, I didn't think I won that first round. I don't know how I got 32-7. Prelim, CR Bahadurzada defeating Brandon Thatch with a sweet submission choke. Nordin Talib knocking out Eric Silva after trying to, I don't know if you remember that little, hey, touch my fist and I'm going to punch you with it.
Right, yeah.
And then, so it's kind of cool seeing Talib knock him out just like that. Vitor Miranda, as mentioned earlier, looked great against Marcelo Guimaraes. Darren Elkins defeating Chas Skelly. Thought that was a good fight. Diego Sanchez, of course, defeating Jim Miller. I thought that was a fun fight to watch. Jason Sago defeating Justin Salas. And Teruto Ishihara versus Julian Erosa.
That's my man there.
A sweet knockout from Ishihara.
Teruto Ishihara. Hashtag, what was it? I love my bitches? Was that it? I love you, my bitches. Teruto Ishihara. He was one of the co-finalists in UFC Road to Japan. Just was it summertime or fall over last year? This guy is fascinating to watch. I don't know how much he's going to really get over with American audiences, although I think that he can. But he's definitely one for the UFC to keep in for the Asian market as they continue to do more shows over there and expand. He won by KO in the second round, early in the second round over Juicy J from Tough 22, the most recent season. This guy is just very flashy style, very engaging, charismatic. Again, I love you, my bitches. I don't know how much that goes over really with the PC American crowds, but I do think that it's one of those things that sticks in your head. He's a fun guy to watch. As I was saying, co-finalist on UFC Road to Japan. That match was a draw, correct? Against
10 round.
I'm
really.
blanking on his opponent, but I think they both got contracts. Obviously, Ishihara did. Nickname is Yabusho, I believe it is. Yashabo. So, guys, here's my challenge for everybody watching or listening. Obviously, you know how to reach us, George and I. Yashabo, somebody with Japanese linguistic skills. What does that mean? I am very curious about that. Get me an answer, and first one to get me an answer, I will send you a University of MMA t-shirt. How about that? I haven't done that
That's
in a while.
awesome. We're going to be wrapping up in the next 45 seconds. But before we give ourselves our Twitter handle, there was a big UFC Unstoppable campaign that kicked off all these, events from April to June. I mean, just going over some of the fights. We don't have time to go over every single fight, but what are some of the fights that you're looking forward to in those next few months? Dude. And we'll talk about it a lot more in detail the next time we're here in 2 weeks.
The big one I think that they announced was Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber 3, which is going to be June 4th. UFC 199. It's the co-main of Rockhold and Weidman 2.
Los Angeles.
Here in Los Angeles at the Forum, the new renovated Forum.
Which, by the way, do you know the Forum is owned by Madison Square Garden?
I didn't realize that. No.
Now it is. Obviously, it used to be the Great Western Forum, but now it's just the Forum, but it's owned by MSG.
I feel that that's going to be, it's pretty straightforward with Cruz winning that, possibly by decision. But the build up to that is going to be fun. Demetrius Johnson and Henry Cejudo. I know I've got I'm kind of biased to DJ, but I'm very curious. I think that Cejudo is the biggest challenge to DJ thus far.
I agree.
DC and John Jones, obviously, that's going to be a lot of fun. The biggest card right now, though, up top to bottom, still is UFC on Fox
19.
Yep. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson.
We'll talk about it a little bit more next time we're here in 2 weeks when we cover Mark Hunt versus Frank Mir.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, where can they find you?
They can find me sometimes in the chat room when we're live, giving it blow up here to Lego Masters 25 941, Lita Fan for Life, Tiani Foster. Looks like it was a great conversation. Big up to DJ Cast. And then our main cornerman, Joe Boza. Meanwhile, I'm all over the internet elsewhere at JTAN716.
You can follow me. And by the way, keep this conversation going. Hashtag ABTVUFC. Keep the conversation going at any time. Hit us up. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, PlayStation Network, Snapchat, etc., etc. G Hermoza, GHERMOZA. The UFC video game comes out on 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
March 15th, I think, it comes out. And I will be getting it. So if anybody wants a piece of this, just bring it. PlayStation Network, G Hermoza, GHERMOZA.
What does Yashabo mean? I want to know. And Mom, doesn't count for you.
Thank you so much for watching us. Thank you so much for listening to us. Thank you so much for even if you're not watching and listening to us, just thank you in general.
Yeah,
just
sure.
Thank you.
That.
We'll see you guys later.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
We will buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.